a topic. And at the end of that, that topic is driven by profit. So what we need to do is get people to understand that sustainability is not about adding cost to your business. It's not about cutting the way you have to behave things. It's about saving money, and it's about growing revenues. And all of those things add to profit. Unfortunately, I would love to live in a world of 20, 30 years future when we all behave beautifully, but at the moment we're driven by a measure in our countries called GDP and a measure of profit and share price in our companies. So the only way to change those behaviours is to get people to understand that sustainability is about good business, and it's about driving incremental improvements into your business, and in doing that, adding value to your business and adding value to the communities and the environment around you. It must make business sense, or people will conveniently ignore the topic. Okay? So we look at it as there's 4 elements. So the first one is compliance. There were 2,000 new laws in the world last year around chemical compliance, environmental compliance, reporting on carbon, occupational health, all those sorts of things. So you need to be able to manage those more efficiently, and that's a role of IT. So once you are tracking carbon, for instance, and a lot of people say, well, what's the point in tracking carbon? How do I make money out of that? It's just adding cost. That's wrong. Carbon is a proxy for business efficiency, for process efficiency. So the only way, unless you're a forestry company, the only way you can emit carbon is to consume energy. So if we can help people track their energy use, that we can teach them how to reduce it. An example of that, a large petrochemical company we work with in the US, they implemented our systems across 7 of their 16 facilities. In the first year, so in 2009, they saved $120 million worth of electricity, just because they could see where they consume it, and they can therefore turn the machines up and down and manage that. They'll roll that out across the other plants this year, and they'll save $200 million in energy year on year. That's bottom line saving, and that's good business. It's good for the environment. It's good for everything. But the bean counters can understand that. The accountants can understand it. So we have to help our customers understand how to decrease cost, and at the same time, using that to then differentiate themselves in the market, to become a leader of a new green product. Unfortunately, we see a lot of customers in Asia that I work with thinking only of their, what does sustainability mean for me? The average person on the street in Jakarta, what do they think about it? And for most of the large businesses, that's the wrong question. It's not what the person in Jakarta thinks about it, it's what my mum thinks about it, because she's the one buying shampoos, etc., in another country. What does she think about palm oil? You only need one controversy, and things like palm oil, forestry, whatever the topic might be, they can be very controversial. And, before we saw Indonesia's going to grow by 7%, a lot of that growth coming from export markets. We need to raise the view of what a sustainable product is and what that means to those export markets. Because at the end of the day, it's my mum and everyone else's mum in the US or Europe or wherever that might be that's buying products containing raw materials from these regions. So sustainability needs to be about profit and good business sense, or from our point of view, it won't work.
Thank you very much, Darren. Now, I don't know whether one of your customers is State Grid of China, world's second biggest company with 1.25 million employees, 80 or 90% of China's electricity. But I do know our next speaker knows the company extremely well. So this is Peggy Liu, who is chair of the JUICE, the Joint US-China Consortium on Clean Energy, an NGO, but Peggy is also a young global leader of tomorrow from the World Economic Forum. 5 minutes, please, perspectives on how you can move big institutions in a big system and a huge economy like China, and whether there's learning there for countries like Indonesia and other Asian countries.
So I talked about this a little bit in the plenary and then our workshop yesterday, but I wanted to start off and just say that I began in the energy industry just 5 years ago. I'm a mother of 2 young children, 6 and 8, who are with me today. And they think that mom's job is to clean the air so that they can breathe it. And they've very happily started helping me clean that air by doing videos on how to save the water, how to do worm composting. And I think the brilliant thing about the world today, especially from my vantage point in Shanghai, China, and Beijing, is that change can happen and it can start with an individual. Especially in China, where as long as you understand who holds the seat of power and how you can enable that person with solutions and help them provide those solutions, deploy them in practical ways, change can happen at very large scale in China, which is why I, as an American citizen, am now based in China trying to help accelerate the greening of China. In the plenary yesterday, I talked about our experiences with smart grid and helping accelerate the introduction of smart grid into China with the help of our partners from the US Department of Energy to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to GE and many other players. But we also worked on a second tipping point, which happened in 2010. Before 2010, all the fashion magazines didn't cover green issues. There was really only one magazine that had a annual green issue called Elle in China. And in 2010, there was this blossoming where every single magazine had a green cover, a green feature, et cetera. And Juice and our ambassadors were in every single one of those issues. So the movie star that we trained to the China's first top supermodel that we trained to be green advocates, myself and other team members. And this was a really interesting tipping point that we had been working on behind the scenes to create. And this is the power of bringing people together. So the power of collaboration I've talked about over and over and over again. And I've talked about the concept of stone soup leadership, which is essentially what Juice does. And it's interesting that in the hallways here, people have asked me several times, how do we create a Juice of Indonesia? And we've been asked about how to create a Juice of Taiwan or Juice of Costa Rica, Juice of the Philippines, et cetera. I don't think they're asking about how to create a joint US-China collaboration of clean energy in these countries. I think they're talking about how do we create a platform for collaboration. So a couple of our simple rules. One is we only work with people who already understand the need and the urgency of going green, like our fellow panel members here. Two, we only work with smiley people, because they're easier to work with. Three, well, you know.
Everyone's smiling on the panel.
It's worked for us. And three, we believe in working with convening the top of the top. So we typically work with CEOs, CTOs, mayors, ministers, et cetera, because we believe that that platform then brings other people to the platform. Four, we really work on the most practical, easy to achieve win-win situations that can be accomplished within 3 years or less. So all of our programs, no matter if it's in factory energy efficiency, sustainable consumption, sustainable urbanization, sustainable collaboration, all have sort of a cap of 3 years or less, which is very different than the normal energy timeframes of 10, 20, 30 years. And again, this shows the power of collaboration, the multiplier effect. I'll give an example of one of the smaller programs that we've worked on, which is Expo Reuse, Expo Building Material Reuse. So as many of you know, in 2010 we had the Shanghai World Expo, and we had 80 pavilions that all cost 80 to 100 million each. Now what happens to the building materials after the expo? We went around and convinced 9 of these pavilions to donate their waste materials, and we're launching the building of a new secondary school in Shanghai that will launch this fall. And this is an example where if you can create a very compelling shared vision, a very tangible success story, so this image of a school, and you show people how they can, in their individual ways, contribute to this project, and you celebrate everybody's contributions, then we can together create great things. So in this case, we're showing reuse, which is a largely ignored one of the 3 R's in China, and we're trying to convince the Chinese government, the local Chinese government, about ways to create platforms for easier reuse. So I think that individuals can, if we think about each of us, rather than corporations and as governments, but think of us as human beings, and that each of us have sort of human nature, rules of human nature. We have our own incentives for going green, like Darren was implying, whether it's making green while going green, or changing the world as NGOs, or creating the next clean nuclear power plant, we all have, the individual